"How quaint," my sister Clara said, her voice dripping with contempt as she eyed my dusty overalls. I had just stepped off the red-eye from Nebraska and hadn't even had a chance to shower before being whisked off to the welcome dinner for my sister's posh New York wedding. Clara looked pristine as always in her designer dress and impeccable updo, sitting next to her smarmy fiancé Mark at the head of the long dining table. Mom shot me a weary look. We weren't accustomed to such finery, having lived simple farm lives back home. Dad stared straight ahead, jaw clenched. "It's just Clara's little joke," Mark said with an indulgent chuckle. "I think it's charming that Lena here helps out on the farm. Gets her hands dirty, doesn't she?" My face burned. I opened my mouth to respond, but Dad's hand on my arm stopped me. "Why don't you tell us about the farm, Lena?" Mark prompted. "Clara doesn't like to dwell on the past, but I'd love to hear how you spend your days." All eyes turned to me as I fumbled for words. Clara and Mark's wealthy friends waited expectantly, lips pursed as if poised to smirk at my unsophisticated life. "Well, we milk the cows every morning," I began. "By hand," a woman named Vivian cut in. "How precious." The table erupted into patronizing chuckles. Mom's eyes glistened. "Now, Vivian," Clara chided lightly, "we mustn't embarrass Lena. Not everyone can afford certain luxuries." My face burned hotter, but before I could respond, Dad slammed his fist on the table. "That's enough," he bellowed. The laughter died instantly. "We may not have your money, but we can sure as hell teach you a thing or two about decency." He stood abruptly and stormed out, Mom rushing after him. Clara didn't move, just swirled her wine glass lazily. "So dramatic," she sighed. "I suppose that's what happens when you waste your life in a rural backwater." Something in me snapped. "You think you're better than us?" I seethed through gritted teeth. "Let me tell you something. That farm put food on the table your whole damn childhood. It clothed you, kept a roof over your head, and this is the thanks Mom and Dad get?" Clara arched one carefully sculpted eyebrow. "It's not my fault they didn't aspire to anything more. I'm finally getting married into a respectable family." She ran a proprietary hand over Mark's chest. "I won't make the same mistakes." Mark raised his glass. "To upward mobility," he toasted. Their friends tittered appreciatively. I saw red. Before I could stop myself, I swept Clara's crystal champagne flute off the table. It shattered dramatically on the marble floor. "Lena!" Clara shrieked, leaping up from her seat. "No, Clara," I seethed through gritted teeth. "You don't get to look down on the people who sacrificed everything for you. It's time someone teach you a real lesson in humility." I spun on my heel and rushed out, leaving shocked gasps in my wake. My hands still trembled with rage as I comforted my distraught parents back in our small, shabby hotel room. Clara's cruelty had only steeled my resolve. If she refused to appreciate her family, I would make her. One way or another, before this wedding was over, my dear sister would finally pay for her arrogance. The next few days were a flurry of wedding preparations. With Clara caught up in the minutiae of floral arrangements, menu tastings, and dress fittings, I was relegated to the background, more servant than sister, expected to fetch and carry, while Clara basked in the glow of playing bride-to-be. She barely spoke 2 words to me that didn't involve an order or complaint. As I helped address invitation after endless invitation, Clara prattled on to her maids of honor about the preparations like a general planning a military offensive. "No, the table linens must be ivory, not ecru," she was saying now, exasperated. "Honestly, must I do everything myself?" I gritted my teeth as I continued scribbling names and addresses. Clara knew nothing of doing things herself. She'd never gotten her hands dirty in her life. "Oh, Lena, don't smudge the ink," Clara chided as she peered over my shoulder. "Hurry up with those. I need help addressing the place cards next." I slammed my pen down. "Actually, I think I'll take a break," I said coldly. Before she could protest, I was out the door. My blood boiled as I roamed the manicured grounds of the lavish Hamptons estate Clara and Mark had rented for the wedding. Everywhere I turned, more extravagance confronted me. The small fortune wasted on flowers, champagne, and decor could have funded our farm for a year. And for what? A gaudy show of wealth and status. Clara didn't appreciate the true value of family. She was marrying Mark for his money and influence in her new social circle. Well, I would make sure her facade came crashing down. I found my parents resting in the shade of a large oak tree. my dad's fingers interlaced with my mom's. Clara hardly had time for them either, brushing them off whenever they tried embracing their only other daughter. My resolve hardened. She would not get away with hurting them like this. I returned inside and quietly snuck into Mark's study. Rifling through the drawers, I found bank statements and investment reports. I pocketed a few. Evidence of Mark's shady financials would make for a handy reveal at the wedding reception. Next, I dug up Clara's day planner and snapped photos highlighting her pretentious schedules and social calendar. Let's see how her fancy friends feel knowing they're accessories to flaunt, not true companions. My phone buzzed. Speak of the devil. Where are you? Clara's shrill voice demanded. I'm not paying you to wander around all day. The place cards need addressing. I rolled my eyes. On my way, I said evenly before hanging up. I tucked the evidence safely into my bag. Soon, Clara, soon you'll wish you had treated your family better when you had the chance. The stage was set. My sister's arrogance would be her downfall. Over the next few days, my plan took shape. Clara's wedding would come crashing down in a blaze of exposed secrets and hypocrisy. I continued playing the role of dutiful sister in public, gritting my teeth through Clara's condescending barbs and imperious demands. But behind the scenes, I was gathering ammunition. My unlikely ally was the wedding planner, Samantha. We had instantly bonded over our shared frustration with Clara's tyrannical behavior. 200 roses in the centerpieces aren't enough. Apparently we need 300, Samantha fumed. Does she think money grows on trees? Want to take her down a peg? I asked casually. Samantha raised her eyebrows. What did you have in mind? Let's just say the wedding photos won't be quite as Pinterest perfect as Clara expects. A slow grin spread across Samantha's face. I'm listening. We plotted in hushed whispers when Clara wasn't around. Samantha recruited other vendors who'd been subjected to Clara's wrath, including the florist, the band, and the caterer. One glimpse of Mark's shady financial records had been enough to convince them. Piece by piece, I collected candid photos and video clips capturing Clara and Mark's true, arrogant, and conceited nature. A lifetime of pent-up resentment fueled me. My parents noticed a change in my demeanor and cornered me one afternoon in the garden. You seem distracted, honey, Mom said, worry creasing her brow. What are you planning? Dad asked outright. I sighed. No point hiding it from them. Don't worry, I said cryptically. I'm going to make sure Clara finally pays for looking down on this family. Dad frowned, but Mom squeezed my hand and nodded. Just be careful, she whispered. I knew they were hurting as much as I was. It was time to take a stand. The night before the rehearsal dinner, I snuck into the banquet hall early to meet with the staff. As we discussed logistics, I saw red lipstick smudged on a half-empty champagne glass on the head table. Interesting. I showed the photo to Samantha, whose eyes narrowed. That little of snake, she muttered. I always knew she was cheating. It was almost too perfect. Clara's sweet facade hid a rotten core. At the dinner, I surreptitiously filmed as she introduced Mark to her friends, fawning over him for show while flashing her alleged lover coy looks across the room. Gotcha. Afterwards, I added the evidence to my growing dossier. Clara's wedding was about to become a one-way ticket to public humiliation. Let's see how her elite circle reacted when they realized they'd been cozying up to a fraud. By the time I was done, Clara's reputation would be in tatters, and my family would finally have its revenge. The day before the wedding, I woke up filled with purpose. Today would involve neutralizing potential obstacles before executing my plan to humiliate Clara tomorrow. My first stop was the boutique where Clara was having her final dress fitting. I needed to get rid of her loyal minion and maid of honor, Jen. I found Jen sipping mimosas. Time to sow some doubt. Jen, I exclaimed, just who I wanted to see. I can't thank you enough for being Clara's rock through all this chaos. Jen preened. Of course I'd do anything for her. We've been best friends since college. Exactly, I said conspiratorially. Can I tell you something in confidence, as her sister? Jen leaned in eagerly. I'm worried about Clara and Mark, I said, feigning concern. Their relationship seems so transactional, you know? I even saw Mark getting cozy with another woman. Jen's eyes went wide. No, Clara said they're soulmates. She's dreamed of this wedding her whole life. I shook my head. I'm telling you as her sister, something seems off. Just keep your eyes open, okay? I'd hate to see Clara get hurt. Planting those seeds was all it took. By the time Clara finished her dress fitting, Jen was nowhere to be found. One down. Next was Mark himself. I found him reviewing seating charts. Showtime. Hey sis, Mark grinned smugly. Come to check everything meets your quaint standards? I ignored the jab. Actually, I wanted to apologize. I may have given folks the wrong impression about you. Mark blinked in surprise but quickly composed himself. Really? I appreciate that, Lena. Now to cast doubt. I can tell how much you love and respect Clara, I said, laying it on thick. All those fancy investors she's introducing you to, you'd never take advantage, right? Mark's eyes narrowed slightly before he laughed. Of course not. I'm all about family. He was a worse actor than I thought. Luckily, it didn't matter. Mark could now see me as a potential threat. Finally, I had to sabotage Clara's preparations. I found her sipping champagne while having her makeup done. Clara, you should reconsider those centerpieces, I said casually. White lilies would look so much better than roses. As expected, she flared up instantly. Excuse me? I picked ivory roses months ago. I shrugged. Oops, my mistake. Too late to change them, I guess. Clara's brow furrowed. Good. A tiny seed of superstitious doubt planted. She was too focused on bridezilla details to see the bigger picture. Everything was in place for the main event. Just one more day before Clara's entire facade collapsed. My pulse quickened. After tomorrow, my family would finally have justice. The night before Clara's wedding, I could hardly sleep, too wired with anticipation for the coming day. In the darkness, I reviewed the damning evidence against my sister one final time. The credit card statements proving Mark's shady business deals. Testimonials from mistreated wedding vendors eager for payback. Even Clara's own petty commentary against her nearest and dearest. I had it all. At dawn, I slipped out to the garden to watch the sunrise. Today was Judgment Day. My thoughts were interrupted by footsteps on the gravel behind me. I whirled around to see Clara standing there in her silk robe, arms crossed. Well, what are you hiding? She demanded. Of course, she must have noticed my repeated whispered conversations and furtive movements these past days. I quickly composed myself. Just wedding jitters, I said lightly. I want everything to go perfectly for you, sis. Clara's eyes narrowed. I don't believe you. Spill it. When I stayed silent, her face flushed with rage. She grabbed my arm roughly. Tell me what you're planning right now, she hissed, all pretense of civility gone. Behind the mask of the polished socialite lurked my sister's real petty, domineering nature. I wrenched my arm from her grasp. Take your hands off me, I spat. I don't answer to you. We stood there, eyes locked, the growing dawnlight illuminating Clara's reddening face. Have it your way, she said coldly. But if you ruin things for me, I'll make you pay. I stepped close until we were nose to nose. Too late for that, I said quietly. You've been the one making Mom and Dad pay your whole life. It ends today. I stormed off before she could respond, adrenaline coursing through me. Only a few more hours now. My expose would ruin Clara socially and financially. Let's see how her so-called friends reacted when they realized she was a shallow, materialistic fraud. She deserved it after a lifetime of looking down on us. I almost wished I could see her reaction when it happened, the dawning humiliation and panic as her facade collapsed. But I couldn't risk being caught prematurely. I would be far away by the time Clara's world came crashing down. Until then, I had to play it cool. Clara's suspicions meant I needed an ironclad alibi when things went down at the reception. Luckily, Jen was easy enough to manipulate. A few vague hints about concerns regarding Clara was enough to provoke an epic meltdown. Right on schedule, Jen barged into Clara's suite, sobbing about duplicity and betrayal, while Clara desperately tried to salvage her closest friendship before walking down the aisle. I made my escape. I had an important video to prepare and send anonymously when the time was right. Soon, Clara, your judgment day is at hand. Get ready to reap what you've sown. The day of Clara's wedding dawned bright and clear. Inside, however, a storm was brewing. As Clara glided down the aisle on my father's arm, smiling radiantly, I maintained a pleasant facade. But inside, my heart hammered with anticipation. The ceremony proceeded smoothly. If Clara suspected anything amiss, she hid it well behind her practiced porcelain smile. At last, it was time. As waiters began circulating with champagne at the reception, I slipped away to make the call. Moments later, the projector flickered on, casting an enlarged video onto the blank wall behind the head table. For one blissful moment, Clara's smile persisted, oblivious. Then chaos erupted. On screen, grainy footage showed Mark kissing a woman who was distinctly not my sister. Gasps and shouts filled the air as all eyes turned to the front. Clara's pristine smile had frozen, lips parted in horror. Mark lunged for the projector, but shoved him back into his seat. "You lying piece of filth!" The raw fury in her voice was terrifying to behold. "How dare you?" Mark stammered meaningless denials, but Clara was no longer listening. Her burning glare turned to the crowd who watched, transfixed and murmuring. "As for the rest of you backstabbing vipers," she seethed, "let's see how you like hearing what I really think of you all." With that, the video changed to show Clara at the bridal boutique, trash-talking guests by name. "Charles acts so enlightened, but he slept with half of Manhattan." "Oh, please. We all know Alexandra bought her way into the symphony board." "That cow Vivian is just obsessed with me." It went on, Clara mercilessly shredding apart the facade of polite society and so-called friendships. I watched, transfixed, as these arrogant snobs reacted with slack-jawed shock at her vitriol. Murmurs turned to outraged shouts. "How could you?" Vivian cried, aghast. "I thought we were friends." Alexandra stood abruptly. "I won't stand here and listen to these lies." She stormed away, others moving to follow. The tableau of Clara's public evisceration was even sweeter than I imagined. I drank it in, watching with quiet satisfaction as her privileged world crumbled to dust, until Clara's wild gaze fixed on me. In 2 strides she crossed the space between us and struck me hard across the face. "You!" she snarled. "I should have known you'd try to ruin everything, you jealous little—" Whatever she planned to say next was lost as Mark grabbed her arm and snapped, "Enough!" To the remaining guests, he announced, "The wedding is off." Gasps rippled through the room. In the ensuing stunned silence, Mark turned on his heel and walked away. Clara stood motionless amid the ruins of her sham marriage and reputation. Her eyes met mine one final time, burning with impotent rage. Then she turned and fled. It was over. I had my revenge at last. Clara finally knew how it felt to have her world humiliated and exposed without mercy. For a moment, I thought I would feel triumphant. Instead, as I gazed out at the destruction I had wrought, an empty sadness overcame me. This was justice, but not redemption. My sister was not the only one with lessons to learn. As Clara's ruined wedding lay in ashes around me, I realized my own path forward remained unclear. In the chaotic aftermath of Clara's ruined wedding, I slipped away unnoticed. I knew she would come looking for me soon, crazed with anger and humiliation. Sure enough, I had just reached my room when Clara burst through the door, eyes ablaze. "You!" She advanced on me, hand raised to strike again. "I want you gone. Your petty jealousy has cost me everything." I stood my ground. "Look closer, Clara. I'm not the one who brought this on yourself." "Don't you dare," she shrieked. I was finally becoming someone, marrying into a good family, not like the nobodies we come from. Her words stung, but I held firm. "Is that all that matters to you? Status and money? What about finding real meaning in life?" Clara let out a hollow, bitter laugh. "Don't lecture me about meaning. Real life isn't some quaint middle American fantasy. I thought you were jealous of my perfect life." "Perfect?" I spat back. "It was a sham built on deceit and vanity." Clara flinched at the harsh truth. For a moment her haughty mask slipped, revealing the scared, insecure girl within, but then her eyes hardened again. "Get out," she hissed, blind fury returning. "I never want to see you again." She stormed out, slamming the door behind her. I stood there shaking, the weight of what I had destroyed hitting me. A soft knock interrupted my thoughts. It was Samantha, the wedding planner. Her smile was bittersweet. "Quite a day, huh?" she said wryly. "I'm almost sorry it's over." I let out a shaky laugh. "It's for the best. Clara needs to change." Samantha nodded. "Hopefully she learns her lesson. And what about you?" I looked away. I didn't regret exposing Clara, but doubts were creeping in. "I need time to think," I said quietly. Samantha squeezed my shoulder. "Whenever you're ready, there are good people waiting." With that, she left. I wish I shared her optimism. Clara was right. I had been jealous of her seemingly perfect life. I realized now no life is perfect, only meaningful if lived with humility and compassion. The path forward would not be easy for either of us. But as I watched Clara's borrowed Bentley disappear down the gravel driveway, this time for good, I knew one thing was certain. Our sibling relationship was shattered forever. For better or worse, things would never be the same again. In the weeks following Clara's failed wedding, the gossip rags had a field day, mocking Manhattan's runaway bride. Her picture graced their covers for a week straight before some other society scandal took over. I read the headlines with a sort of numb ambivalence. I had wanted to see Clara humbled and brought low, yet now that she was, I felt neither vindication nor satisfaction, only sadness for what our family had become. My parents tiptoed around me, unsure what to say after everything that had happened. The unspoken distance between us was worse than any lecture. 2 weeks later, I still hadn't left New York. I kept replaying the sequence of events in my head, wishing I could unravel the tangled knot of sisterhood, jealousy, and retribution that had led us here. One day, as I wandered aimlessly through Central Park, my thoughts were interrupted by a familiar voice. "Lena? Is that you?" I turned in surprise to see Samantha hurrying towards me, beaming. In spite of myself, I smiled back. Samantha's warm caring was a balm amidst the emotional wreckage. We fell easily into conversation, strolling together around the pond as she caught me up on wedding gossip. Finally, she paused, expression growing serious. "Forgive me for prying, but you seem burdened," she said gently. "Have you reconciled with Clara yet?" I let out a harsh, brittle laugh. "Clara and I are done. She'll never forgive me." Samantha squeezed my shoulder. "She will in time, when she's ready to change." I shook my head bitterly. "Clara won't change who she is. I need to accept that." "But you can change who you are," Samantha said. "Leave jealousy and pettiness behind. Forgive others and yourself." Her words resonated within me. I had always thought Clara was the problem in our relationship. Only now did I see my own flaws clearly. In that moment, something shifted inside me. I saw a chance to let go of resentment and embrace empathy. My soul felt lighter than it had in years. I turned and hugged Samantha fiercely. "Thank you," I whispered. "I think I'm finally ready to go home." The next morning, I bid my parents a loving goodbye, promising to visit soon. As I boarded my flight back, the possibilities of the future stretched out ahead of me, rewritten. I didn't know if Clara would ever let go of her anger, but I could let go of mine. That was change enough for now. The wheels lifted off, leaving behind the weight of my sisterly grudge. When I returned home, there was a lightness in my step that hadn't been there before. Who knew what life held next? For today, I was simply grateful for the wisdom I had found and the compassion I now carried within.